imagine the United States, the most powerful military nation in history, walking away from two things simultaneously: a war it started and an alliance it built. Donald Trump is now signaling both. The Iran war, he says, could be over in 2 to 3 weeks, and the United States, he says, is, in his own words, absolutely considering leaving NATO. Two announcements, one from the same man in the same moment. Each one on its own would be the defining foreign policy story of the decade. Together, they represent something larger than either one alone. Because this is not just about ending a war, and it is not just about leaving an alliance. This is about what happens to global power when the country that has anchored it for 75 years decides it wants different terms. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to walk you through both decisions, what is driving them, what they would mean for Europe, for the Middle East, and for you, and the question that every analyst, every ally, and every adversary is asking right now. Is this the beginning of peace and a smarter America? Or is this the start of the most destabilizing shift in global order since the end of the Cold War? To understand why Trump is signaling an exit from the Iran conflict, you need to understand what the United States set out to achieve, and how close it believes it is to achieving it. The primary stated objective of Operation Epic Fury was to cripple Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons. That meant targeting nuclear research facilities, missile production sites, weapons storage infrastructure, and the command and logistics networks that support Iran's military capability more broadly. Trump's assessment, stated publicly, is that those objectives are nearly complete. Iran's nuclear program has been significantly degraded. Its air defense network has been largely destroyed. Its missile launch infrastructure along the Strait of Hormuz coast has been struck with purpose-built bunker-buster bombs. Its military capacity to project power at the scale it maintained before February 28th has been substantially reduced. But military progress is only one of the three forces pushing Trump toward an exit. The second is economic, the disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway carrying approximately 20% of the world's maritime oil supply, has sent energy prices surging globally. Oil has breached $100 per barrel multiple times during this conflict. Global markets have absorbed sustained instability. Consumers in the United States and across the world have felt the cost at the fuel pump and in rising prices for goods that depend on energy to produce and transport. That economic pressure does not discriminate between allies and adversaries. It hits American households. And for a president who has consistently framed his agenda around economic strength and domestic prosperity, a war that is raising fuel prices for American families is a war with a clock on it. The third force is political. Polling reported by Reuters indicates that most Americans now support a swift conclusion to the conflict. That public sentiment, combined with the economic pressure and the military progress, creates a convergence of incentives for Trump to move toward an exit, and to do so on his own terms rather than under pressure. The key phrase in Trump's public statements is worth examining carefully. He says the U.S. could withdraw even without a formal peace deal. That is a significant statement. It means the United States is not necessarily waiting for Iran to agree to anything specific. It is evaluating whether its own objectives have been sufficiently achieved to justify declaring a form of completion and stepping back from active combat operations. Whether that represents genuine strategic success or a convenient definition of victory remains a matter of serious debate. What is not debatable is that the signals are real, the timeline is short, and the next 2 to 3 weeks could determine the shape of the Middle East for a generation. The second major signal from Trump, that the United States is actively considering leaving NATO, did not arrive without context, and understanding the context matters enormously. Trump's anger at NATO allies is rooted in 3 specific grievances that emerged directly from Operation Epic Fury.
First, NATO members refused to join the military campaign against Iran. The alliance did not endorse the operation, and individual member states declined to commit forces or materiel to what they viewed as a unilateral American action rather than a collective defense response.
Second, several NATO members denied the United States access to bases on their territory for offensive operations against Iranian targets. This was particularly significant because American operational planning depends heavily on forward-positioned assets in Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. When allies declined to host those operations, the logistical complexity of the campaign increased substantially. Third, NATO members did not join the effort to secure the Strait of Hormuz, despite the fact that the closure of that waterway is disrupting energy supplies to European nations as severely as it is affecting global markets more broadly. NATO was founded in 1949, 4 years after the end of World War II, on a single core principle. An attack on one member is an attack on all. That collective defense guarantee has been the bedrock of Western security for 75 years. It was invoked for the first and only time in history after the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States, when NATO allies joined America in its response. Trump's charge against the alliance is that the relationship has become one-sided, that the United States contributes a disproportionate share of NATO's military capacity and budget, while European members benefit from American security guarantees without matching the commitment. That argument is not new. Trump made versions of it throughout his first term. What is new is the context. A live military conflict, a specific set of grievances about allied behavior during that conflict, and a public statement that leaving the alliance is genuinely being considered. Analysts quoted by The Guardian have described the current moment as potentially the most serious crisis in NATO's history, not because the alliance has faced a military threat it could not handle, but because the threat is coming from inside. A United States that is openly questioning whether NATO membership serves its interests is itself a destabilizing force in global security, regardless of whether it follows through on the threat. It is worth being precise about what leaving NATO would actually require. Under U.S. law, a formal withdrawal from the alliance requires congressional approval, a process that could take considerable time and would face significant political resistance. Trump cannot unilaterally exit the treaty by executive action alone, but he does not need to formally exit the treaty to weaken the alliance substantially. Reduced U.S. military contributions, withdrawal of American forces from European bases, declining participation in joint exercises and planning. All of these steps can be taken incrementally, creating de facto disengagement without the legal threshold of formal withdrawal being crossed. And the uncertainty itself, the allied uncertainty about whether American commitments remain reliable, is already reshaping defense planning in European capitals that have spent 7 decades assuming U.S. security guarantees were permanent. If Trump follows through on both signals, ending the Iran conflict and moving away from NATO, the world that emerges looks substantially different from the one that existed on February 27th, the day before Operation Epic Fury began. In the Middle East, an end to the conflict, even without a formal peace agreement, would create a period of short-term stabilization. Oil prices would ease. Hormuz shipping would gradually resume. The immediate humanitarian and economic pressures would begin to lift. But the longer-term picture is more complicated. Iran would emerge from this conflict with its nuclear program significantly degraded, its military infrastructure severely damaged, and its economy under enormous strain. That combination historically produces one of 2 outcomes: genuine strategic recalculation and a willingness to negotiate, or a quiet, patient rebuilding effort aimed at restoring exactly the capabilities that were destroyed. Which of those paths Iran chooses depends heavily on whether the political and economic pressure that comes after the shooting stops is sustained or relieved.
In Europe, the consequences of American disengagement from NATO are immediate and structural. European nations, particularly those on NATO's eastern flank, closest to Russia, have built their entire defense posture around the assumption of American support. Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, Finland, and Sweden have all made military investments and strategic decisions based on the reliability of Article 5. If that reliability becomes uncertain, European defense spending must increase dramatically and quickly. The European Union would likely accelerate its long-discussed but slowly progressing plans for strategic autonomy, the development of a genuine European defense capability independent of American commitments. Russia, meanwhile, would almost certainly interpret any weakening of American commitment to NATO as an opportunity. Vladimir Putin has made no secret of his view that NATO's eastern expansion was a strategic provocation. A United States that is retreating from that expansion changes his strategic calculus in ways that European capitals are already calculating with quiet alarm. And the question that sits beneath all of this, the one that no analyst has a clean answer to, is who fills the gap. If the United States steps back from its role as the guarantor of global order, that role does not disappear. It gets contested by Russia in Eastern Europe, by China in the Indo-Pacific, and increasingly in the Middle East, by regional powers whose ambitions were previously constrained by the existence of American power and commitment. The gap does not stay empty. It gets filled by whoever moves fastest and with the greatest confidence. Let me bring this together in plain terms. Donald Trump is simultaneously signaling the end of a war that has reshaped the Middle East in under a month and questioning America's commitment to the alliance that has underpinned Western security for 75 years. If the Iran war ends in the next 2 to 3 weeks, even without a formal agreement, it represents a significant American military and strategic achievement. But the durability of that achievement depends on what comes after the last missile falls. If NATO weakens, even without a formal American withdrawal, it reshapes the security architecture of Europe at a moment when Russian aggression is already testing the alliance's resolve. These two decisions are not separate stories. They are two chapters of the same story, the story of what kind of global role the United States chooses to play in the years ahead. Whether that choice produces a safer world or a more dangerous one will not be answered in the next 2 to 3 weeks. It will be answered over the next 2 to 3 decades. This is the moment. These are the decisions. And the world is watching. 3 questions before I go. Drop your answer in the comments. A. Trump says the Iran war could end in 2 to 3 weeks, even without a formal peace deal. Do you think leaving without a formal agreement locks in the military gains, or does it leave Iran free to quietly rebuild everything that was destroyed? B. Trump is openly considering leaving NATO. Do you think this is a genuine policy shift toward American isolationism, or a calculated pressure tactic to force European allies to contribute more to their own defense? C. If the United States steps back from both the Iran conflict and NATO, who fills the gap? And is that a world you feel safer or less safe living in? A, B, or C? Drop it below right now. If this gave you a clearer picture of what these two decisions could mean for the world, share it with someone who needs to understand what is at stake. Like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will see you in the next one.